Elden Ring is a masterpiece when it comes to world building and lore, but this is a Festivus episode.
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're gonna hear about it.
One of my biggest complaints with the game is the incredibly convoluted timeline. We don't really know when major events happened, even though they should be common knowledge. For instance, did Marika shatter the Elden Ring before or after Miquella was kidnapped? The intro cinematic makes it sound like the former, but if you talk to Gideon after defeating Malenia, he says this.
I heard speculation Miquella embedded himself in the Hairlick tree, but before he could finish, someone cut the tree open and absconded with his infant form. Perhaps the Queen's sorrow was justified.
It makes it sound like Marika was driven by grief to shatter the Elden Ring, but only after Miquella was kidnapped. And this is just one of many events that shouldn't require some elaborate lore theory to piece together when they occurred. When was the Star Scourge conflict? Did Miquella and Malenia exist at the same time as Godwyn? How much time happened between the Night of the Black Knives and the shattering of the Elden Ring? And how much time happened between the shattering of the Elden Ring and the Shattering War? And how much time has actually passed since the Shattering War? It comes off as really contrived when we can still talk to the participants in those events. We can not only talk to Ranni, we can even marry her and be on a honeymoon for 1,000 years. Now again, there are a lot of great theories about when exactly these events happened. But that's my point, is that we shouldn't have to come up with theories for when something happened. I think what's more interesting to speculate about and try to understand is what exactly happened or why it happened. That is, someone's motives behind it. And having a proper timeline can really give us a firmer grasp of the world's events and the lore. And once you have an understanding of the lore, then we can talk about the more compelling aspects of a work, like the narrative themes or the deeper philosophical meanings. Just to clarify, when it comes to the really ancient civilizations, like the Claymen or Elden John, it makes sense that we don't really know when these exactly happened, and we have to turn to some type of digital archaeology to uncover it and try to learn about these civilizations. I don't have a problem with that. That would make sense in keeping with the setting. In a way, the timeline reminds me a lot of some of the other criticisms that have been levied against Elden Ring for its bosses, that they just got to be way too overtuned and way too complicated. One of the aspects I love about FromSoft games is that you can come across some random item description and it can drastically change your view of the game's lore, or see things in an entirely new perspective. And that's also one of the things I loathe about FromSoft. What I want to focus on are game-changing item descriptions, but they're placed in needlessly obscure locations that are completely divorced from how you get them. For me, the best example of this is the Order Healing spell. Now, this spell is absolutely key to understanding one of the game's 6 endings, the Age of Order ending that you achieve with the Gold Mask quest. The noble Gold Mask lamented what had become of the hunters, how easy it is for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. All the good and the great wanted, in their foolishness, was an absolute evil to contend with. Does such a notion exist in the fundamentals of order? This spell makes it clear that Goldmask's opposition to the Golden Order is because it's a flawed, oppressive institution. Without this context, this key insight into Goldmask's philosophy is completely lost. And since the Age of Order ending is basically a Mass Effect 3 ending with a gold filter, you don't really get a lot of information about what Goldmask is trying to achieve. So I completely understand why some people might view the Goldmask ending as potentially sinister if they never came across this spell. You don't actually come across this incantation during Goldmask's quest. You have to kill a teardrop scarab that's in the Shifra Aqueduct that you can only reach after you defeat General Radahn and reach the upper part of Nokron. So just for you keeping score at home, it's found in a hidden area within a secret area. If you got this spell during the quest line, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Even if you just put this teardrop scarab near the statue of Radagon, there's already a teardrop scarab that drops a spell not too far away from the Radagon statue. You could have just put it there. Another great example is the Helfen Steeple. This is the lampwood which guides the dead of the spirit world, the lamplight is similar to grace in appearance, only it is said that it can only be seen by those who met their death in battle. So this item description confirms the existence of a spirit world, which I think could be the setting for the DLC. But you don't get this item through any sort of important quest or massive dungeon hunting. No, you get it by killing a random Tibio Mariner in the mountaintops of the Giants. I can see how a Tibio Mariner would have the lampwood, but he can be the 4th Tibio Mariner you encounter in the game, and he doesn't even have a boss health bar. Then we have items that have a really bizarrely low drop rate for some reason. For instance, there's the Sun Realm Shield, which talks about the seat of the sun. The sun doesn't really have that prominent of a place in the lands between. So a shield with this depiction shows that the sun was once a much more important symbol, and yet you only get this shield if you form a certain type of Skelly Boy. There's also the Haligtree Crest Great Shield, which has, I think, maybe one of the only depictions of how Mikola's Haligtree was supposed to look. You can only get this shield if you form one specific Haligtree Knight at the bottom of Elphael. My criticism is with items that are just needlessly obscure, because in some instances it does make sense from a lore perspective why it would be hidden away or obscure. A great example of this is the primeval sorcery Founding Reign of Stars, which is hidden away in the Heretical Rise. I don't really have an issue with those type of placements because it would make sense that a heretical type of sorcery that would be locked away or suppressed by a ruling authority. Finally, one other thing that's really mystifying is just how many changes were made between the 1.0 text of the game and the current version of the game. When I say 1.0, this is the retail version of the game that you can play as long as you don't connect to the internet. Having cut content in the game development cycle is completely understandable and natural, and having day one patches to fix bugs or rebalance weapons is also standard in the industry. What Elden Ring does is they drastically change their lore between the version on the game disc and what's currently available. Many thanks to Zully the Witch for compiling all of these changes. I've never seen a game change so much of its lore with a day one patch. Some changes are just fun, like Radahn had a pet cat, or Rykard was canonically bi, but other differences have massive implications. For instance, Mikola was effectively confirmed as the successor to Marika, and Radagon sent soldiers to help Mikola in the Haligtree. Or we learned that the Beast Folk got their intelligence specifically from the Greater Will intervening, which is very unusual since the Greater Will has a very passive presence in the game, almost to the point where it could basically not exist. And it doesn't end with item descriptions either. FromSoft is well known for their environmental storytelling, and there were a few cases where they actually patched in new environmental details, as Birdo Please showed in a great video. In the original 1.0 version of the game, EG wasn't on fire, he was just surrounded by a bunch of Black Knife assassins. But FromSoft patched in the Black Flame effect. And with this simple change, we have drastically different implications. Does this mean that the Black Knife assassins were working with the Godskin nobles? Were the Black Knife assassins also part of the Glowmite Queen's entourage? I might actually do a video breaking down all of the lore changes between the 1.0 version and today's version. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really interested to see what yins think, so let me know down below.